So, we've got some signs we can use to help us evaluate our current practices and beliefs, both individually and collectively. Those signs are 1. Moral arguments against a practice already exist. 2. Non-moral counter-arguments are made in response to those moral arguments. And 3. We see strategic ignorance regarding those who are complicit in the perpetuation of a given practice under question. Something Appiah doesn't cover is how we move from knowing that future generations will condemn us for some practice to actually addressing the current customs and attitudes around that practice. I do not have a comprehensive or exhaustive list for that transition either, but I want to comment on the idea and practice of raising awareness. Raising awareness as an end in itself is certainly a dead end, and I think folks are right to be skeptical of any person, campaign, or event whose only objective is to raise awareness on a topic or issue. But when it comes to working towards broad moral changes, we find that raising awareness of moral issues with our modern practices, while insufficient to altering our modern practices, is a necessary first step. Beyond raising awareness, each moral practice will have fairly unique barriers that require different approaches. But raising awareness is a required first step because of two distinct but mutually reinforcing components to it: developing an open dialogue on the topic and accessing and distributing the facts of the matter. Open dialogue and access to facts are going to be an essential component to correcting any moral problem, even if the particular things that one does next, the particular steps or actions taken next, will vary widely per issue. So in other words, more people knowing what's going on and talking about what's going on is required to build the kind of social movements that can result in massive shifts in our cultural norms and what we consider morally permissible or morally unacceptable. So, as mentioned at the beginning of Appiah's article, slavery abolitionists took up educating the masses about what happened to black folks who were kidnapped from Africa and trafficked across the Atlantic Ocean. And I should maybe more specifically and thoughtfully say, slavery abolitionists took up educating primarily white folks and primarily non-slave owning folks, or folks that owned a couple of slaves, who were willfully ignorant of what happened to this person before they came under their control. And that the work of converting the beliefs of this group of free white folks into caring about the lives of the black folks that were kidnapped and then eventually, naturalized within the U.S., born into parents that were enslaved, etc., that this whole process of education was an important step to building a strong abolitionist movement in the U.S. For those who didn't know, this was a significant information to learn, namely what was happening to black people when they were kidnapped from Africa. For those that perhaps kind of knew or knew some of the information, this work opened up different social circles to talking about slavery abolition, and or led to newspapers covering abolitionist stories and so on. And so raising awareness, when done well, does two things. It brings the facts of the matter to the surface and brings a topic to the level of common discourse or common knowledge. For big moral shifts on the societal level, part of the necessary work will be this kind of slow education. Now it is time to reflect. While Appiah's article was geared towards thinking ahead, I want you to now consider its implications for thinking about the past. Consider what kind of moral evaluation we can make of people in the past, and write 1 to 2 paragraphs on the following questions. 1. What moral justification do we have based on our historical context? And how responsible are we for overcoming our historical context and anticipating moral progress? And this will very much this might ring some bells with previous reflection questions we've taken up in the last couple weeks. 2. When we morally evaluate past practices as morally failing somehow, how much slack should we give folks for their historical context? In other words, to what extent can we hold people responsible for seeing past social norms? And 3, what do you make of Appiah's use of the phrase strategic ignorance? Does this language help us distinguish between, on the one hand, what people should know because they reasonably could know differently, and on the other, something more like genuine or justified ignorance?